Hello and welcome to the Global Health Beat, where we are exploring the trends, nuances, and opportunities for HCP engagement in international markets. I'm Amanda Prito, and I'm very happy to introduce my colleague, Matt Durham from CMI Media Group, along with Michael Kirby from WebMD and Steve Royal from Swipe Health. We are spanning 3 time zones to bring you this very exciting conversation about HCP media engagement in the land down under. So let's get started. Michael, I would love to start with you. Hi, thanks for being here. So you have just, I believe, recently moved to Australia, and you are leading Medscape's expansion in Australia and New Zealand. So I'd love to hear from you. What is exciting you and Medscape from a pharma marketing and a business opportunity perspective in where you're living now?
Thanks, Amanda. So I suppose it's probably quite good to take a little tiny step back, really, I suppose, in terms of Medscape. So we are 2025 kind of marks 30 years of Medscape supporting HCPs kind of globally, and that includes Australia and New Zealand. And effectively, during that time, we've built a relationship with these HCPs in the country, and we have over 230,000 kind of registered users. And I suppose what that's given us is an opportunity from all of those insights, all of that data that we have to kind of, partner with pharmaceutical companies here and our Australian pharma partners to tap into that engagement. And Australia's always been a kind of a very important market for us. We've always had run campaigns that target Australian physicians, and the kind of demand has kind of grown over time. And so I suppose the excitement comes from being able to bring that knowledge, access the audience. You know, we have some unique digital solutions, and it is an opportunity to actually speak to partners here in country on the right time. And I think with the time difference that we had when I was based in London, that challenge is scheduling calls is difficult. Like you said, we're spanning kind of different time zones for this. So it's really exciting in that respect. We've got great engagement, we've got a really good audience, and that's exciting to kind of bring that to the Australian market.
That's so great. And Steve, on the contrary, you have been in Australia your entire career. So we're curious to hear your perspective on HCP marketing and HCP engagement from your experience.
I haven't been in Australia my whole life. I did spend a big chunk over there in London for a time where I got to learn a lot about what was happening over there. And it was very inspiring because at the time, we're talking maybe 15 years ago, there was not a lot happening here. Typically, in terms of media spend, it was very much focused at a DTC level. But the specialists were always very tricky. And with the exception of maybe journal advertising or conference spend, there really wasn't a lot to do. And you just had to kind of trust the numbers you were given. So there's no real sophistication there. But since coming back, there's been some great operators now come to Australia, like Medscape, for example, who are able to now offer this level of targeted engagement at a specialist level. And of course, that's where the majority of the interest really is, because that's where the budgets are going with the developments in niche medicines and rare disease. We're really trying to engage more. So the industry, whilst not focused so much on the advertising side of things, is very, very attuned to the needs of the customer in terms of medical education. But it's just where does the clinician and how does the clinician become aware of that medical education and all this great work that the company's doing. And that's where we're in a great spot now with the new digital initiatives and pharma companies investing to understand where they are and start to actually measure the impact that they're getting.
Actually measure, right? To have something actually measurable and not just trusting the numbers you're giving. Thank you, Steve. All right, so let's touch on medical affairs for just a moment, if we can. I'm curious, Michael and Steve, from both of your perspectives, what trends or changes are you seeing? Michael, would you like to go first?
Yeah, so I think medical affairs typically maybe in the past was separate to a kind of commercial or a product kind of brand team. You know, they maybe work quite in a silo in an organization. Sorry, and but I think now there's a lot more unity. They work very closely together, and so I think from a kind of holistic approach, it's really important to have them included in any plan, any conversation. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, no, you've hit the nail on the head there, Michael. Once considered just a support function, and the sales prevention unit, as they were affectionately referred to a decade or so ago, unfairly, I might say. Now, because of their involvement in the development of a lot of the medical education in particular, they're just as motivated to see it put to good use. So hence we've seen the involvement of omni-channel teams within medical affairs departments to ensure that's done. The silos are still a bit of an issue to be talked about. We see omni-channel in medical affairs and omni-channel in commercial, and sometimes they don't talk, but we're in a much better place now than what we were, and it's moving in the right direction.
Very notable. Thanks for bringing that up. So, Michael, let's swing back to you. You spent some time with Medscape in London, actually, I think a pretty long time. So I'm curious, what differentiators or even similarities did you experience in working with European clients versus Australian clients?
The similarities with Europe and the UK and the rest of the world kind of outweigh the differences, I think. So, I mean, effectively, universally, doctors are busier and busier every year. Health systems have increased pressure and they need information. So, they need it from a trusted source at any time on any device. And that's been true for probably all the time of any kind of, platform being around. And I suppose there are also some level of opportunities where the similarities are wherever you are in the world and whichever company you are, you've also got to reach HCPs. A pharma company needs to reach them, and they need to empower them to make those best kind of clinical decisions. So, I mean, in terms of the sort of similarities and the differences, I mean, I don't think there is that much there. And also the regulatory element I've seen is that my early understanding is that the model is very strong. It's very similar to NICE and the MHRA. You have the Therapeutics Goods Administration here, the PBS scheme. So there are very similar principles in terms of, what that looks like.
All right, so Matt, let's hear from you. From a media agency perspective and in your role as global lead, what are you experiencing and what is your take on HCP engagement and working with our clients and brands in the Australian region versus other European regions?
Increasingly important to us, but also really exciting. I say that because we work a lot in Europe and Canada, and in those markets we are kind of, for lack of a better word, restricted in terms of some of what we can do around like privacy regulations, where we know from our US colleagues, Australia is much more similar to the US from that perspective, right? We don't have as strict rules in how we go about reaching the HCPs or kind of not to a one-to-one level, but we can be way more granular. And when we can be way more granular, we can then be more targeted, we can drive better engagement. And we can do that with lots of different partners in Australia. When we look at the reporting and how campaigns perform, because we can be way more granular in how we're targeting, we often see way better or much more improved engagement. Which makes more exciting media campaigns, better performing media campaigns, happier clients, which is always nice.
That's very cool. And so then to that end, Matt, what actionable insights or guidance would you have for pharma and healthcare brands, given what you're experiencing?
It's an interesting question. So like internally, CMI generates a lot of our own proprietary data on like media insights and media habits of HCPs. And we're increasingly doing that from a global perspective. And Australia is one of the markets where we survey HCPs to see, what channels they prefer or how to engage with different platforms, etc. And, maybe it's a consequence of, the English language in Australia. But we see, it's interesting that when we're approaching campaigns in Australia, we know that in Australia there's a lot of really good domestic platforms like the MGAs or the AusDocs that we can use and kind of deliver for our audiences. But we also know that we see Australian HCPs on so many different platforms, right? Like Michael has mentioned, there's a huge Australian audience on Medscape that we can target. We also see them on other international platforms. So when we're kind of approaching these Australian campaigns, we're always looking at, okay, these are the best Australian platforms where we know we can reach the HCPs. But we also always find them in large numbers on so many other platforms that can get missed if you're just looking at the Australian platform. So we always try to take, I guess an international mindset when we're planning for Australia, which I think reflects, maybe the international mindset of the Australian HCPs themselves, who are looking for information everywhere they can find it, and not just always on, the Australian platforms necessarily.
This has been such an excellent discussion. So let's wrap it up and let's go to Steve to hear what might surprise marketers or people in general in other countries about something that you've learned or experienced about pharma marketing in Australia.
Yes, thanks, Amanda. And as an Australian, I have to give my fellow countrymen a big rap here, but it really is the level of expertise and the skill involved. For Australia represents such a small component of the global market, they are usually allocated a relatively similar proportion of the available budget spend for marketing. So for a long time, they've had to learn to do more with less. And I know everybody talks about it, but there really is not that much here that marketers have been working with for a long time. So they've had to find really innovative ideas and ideation initiatives to get that sort of cut through and make a real difference with their marketing efforts. And as a result, the pathways from Australia are always in motion. Everybody's performs well. They seem to be overseas. So we're losing a lot, but there's a really good churn here. So lots and lots of good, efficient, effective, excellent marketers are coming from Australia.
Efficiency and effectiveness is very important, right? Michael, anything to add?
I'm probably new to understand, anything that's been of a surprise so far. I think one of the surprises for me is the kind of the level of kind of understanding, like Matt mentioned earlier, about international platforms, and maybe that focus is a very much an Australian specific. And there's definitely an education piece for me in my role here to kind of for the Australian partners we want to work with to kind of understand Medscape and understand our engagement model and the opportunities, and so that is something that is been a little bit of a surprise that they maybe don't have that experience with us, so something to build on.
Wonderful. Thank you for adding that. Sounds like there's a lot of opportunity, and to Matt's point, a lot of excitement in marketing in this region. So thank you to Michael, Steve, and Matt, and thank you for joining us on the Global Health Beat. We'll see you soon.